Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Success Series. I'm your host, David Berg. We're here for another episode today with Gautam Ahuja, episode 24 of the Success Series. Gautam started his career at Credit Suisse as an investment banker. He now runs a fund, Blue Scorpion Investments, is the co-founder and general partner of the fund. And they're investing primarily in CPG brands with a wide variety of different products and companies, most notably Van Leeuwen Ice Cream. Their focus is on companies that disrupt the space, but also come with a spiritual background and wanting to do good for the world. It's an absolute pleasure to have him on the show with us today. Gautam, if you could just share a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are today, and we'll kick it off from there.
Well, thank you for having me, David. My journey was not your typical fund manager journey. Most fund managers start off in a very, succinct path where they first start with another fund and then move to start their own fund, or they come out of being operators of businesses and come. Our path, me and my business partner's path, was completely different. My career started actually in investment banking. I started in media, telecom, technology, investment banking at Credit Suisse in London. And then I actually left that job to start my own startup. So I got the entrepreneur itch. I was the first company we created to stream audio over mobile phones. And, that was during the 2000 crash we started. So worst timing. We did raise money even at that market, but then by 2001, it became very difficult and funding completely dried up, which is when I got rehired back at Credit Suisse, and I moved to New York at that point. And then I moved to the more mathematical area, which is what my interest was. I was very good at the maths and numbers, so I joined one of the most complex form of finance, which was structured derivatives. And in a very short time, I actually became the head of Americas for structured derivatives and a managing director post the 2008 crisis. That actually allowed me, or it started my journey into VC, because I was not allowed to trade public market securities. And that, as a result, meant that I had to, invest my own personal money in other asset classes, and I started dabbling in startups. Along the way, I met my business partner, was Jameson, who basically was this creative marketing genius, has built his own clothing brand. That led to becoming the creative director for Red Bull USA and also Diesel USA. And when he was actually with Red Bull is kind of when I met him, and I saw he was doing all these interesting stuff with brands and how he was building culture around the brands. And he was really investing his money also into startups. So I started dabbling with him and investing with him. We found out we had very complementary skill sets. We both fell in love with investing in consumer. It was bringing a lot of purpose and meaning. For me, being in finance, you're not really adding value, just creating wealth. So I was like, I need to do something more with my, mathematical background and add value. And, this felt like purposeful journey because you're bringing these great brands to market, which are helping founders build companies that, have a bigger purpose than them. It's like you're bringing better quality stuff to consumers, health and wellness. You also, mindful for the environment. So all these positive impacts was really what drove me to do this, came a driver rather than money. And, Jameson was already looking to do a fund, and I figured out an exit from from Credit Suisse, which took 2 years.
Wow, 2 years.
Yeah, just because
was the legality involved? What was the
issue was that I was very senior, and I just couldn't walk away because I had so much deferred compensation, and I'd worked really hard for that. And there were points in after 2010 or 11, they were giving 90% deferred compensation.
Wow.
So it was really hard to walk away from that. So I had to figure out a deal for me to leave where I would get that. And that negotiation took 2 years. Yeah, so I was stuck
that
there
must
for
have taken
2
a lot
years.
of patience, right?
But, it was a long-term journey, and, I was glad when it happened. And then we got started in the fund, and that's how the journey started for us.
Beautiful. And a lot of the guests that we have on, their childhood and their upbringing was very much correlated to what they chose to do career-wise and so on. So what was your childhood like growing up? Kind of paint that picture for
Yeah, so my childhood was always in a business family. So I knew at some point I had to do something on my own. This is from generations, from great-great-grandfather. We were more in the primary sector, which is farming and milling. So it came from generations. We were farmers and millers, and owned a lot of land and at that point, it was like India pre-independence was really, the autonomy was given to all the big landlords and to, I guess, there were the royals. So that journey continued till my father's generation. Till then, he wanted to like diversify and get out of like the farming milling and go into other businesses like film finance and real estate development in the metropolitan cities, etc., and export businesses. So they moved to that. So I grew up in that journey, but I never enjoyed any of those businesses. I had a very mathematical mind. I want to do something math oriented. So when I went to university, even though I studied business management thinking I'll go back and join the family business and help, I fell in love with, finance, and I wanted to create my own journey. So, I worked in the bank and all that, but in the back of my head, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is why I'd quit to start it once and then to go back to, again, quit to start again.
Right. And was it challenging for your parents that you were going to come to New York or London at the time and go away from the family business?
No, so that's what I'm very grateful for. My parents have always been very supportive of whatever I did. It's not your typical Indian parents, especially business parents, who always want you to kind of create the succession and, continue with the family business. But, deep down, my father, he had different desires and he was forced back in the family business. And he was living in London to come back to India and join the business. And he didn't want that for me. Mm-hmm. So I guess like his negative experience of not being able to do his career path kind of led him to allow me to do what I wanted to do.
Right. And then, okay, so let's fast forward back to Credit Suisse. So when you were in investment banking, a lot of people, they see the suits, it looks very glamorous. What is it really like? It was kind of what is it like working there on the day to day?
Oh my God, if you're a first year analyst, there's no glamour. You're working till like midnight, 2 a.m. every day, weekends being called. And I remember when I started, there was not even Blackberries, right? It was like not smartphones. It was like just your 2G phones. And so you had to constantly call and check your voicemail to see what's going on. The only glamour thing was that, yes, you used to get to do a lot of business travel and travel these destinations, but they would just be for meetings. I mean, they were brutal as well, because I remember I worked at the privatization of Qatar Telecom. I was the youngest analyst to be doing this job and building the entire financial model to determine the IPO price. But so I had to speak with all the telecom people in the, seniority to understand the business. So they would fly me to Qatar in this amazing first class. Mm. But the thing was that I couldn't stay overnight because they wanted me back. I would literally fly overnight to Qatar, spend the day there, and then take an overnight flight back again to be back at the office to work 12 to 14 hours, 16 hours sometimes. So that was a brutal. So the glamour was,
for a few hours you're sipping champagne on the flight and then you
exactly
right back around.
So
wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it gave a lot of discipline to me, and it was a good foundation to everything I did after that.
Right. Awesome. So a lot of our listeners are younger audience just starting in their career, and a lot of them are actually interested in investment banking, working at various banks. What would be your advice to them on just getting started and growing quickly like you did?
I think, investment banking is a great foundation. I think, some people love it and become a career. But I always encourage people to do it because it really helps build a great foundation, not only as a hard work and work ethic, but also in terms of like foundations of finance, right? Like it's used everywhere, right? Even if you have a startup, you have to understand finance, and it's amazing. Like I take things for granted, but a lot of these founders don't understand balance sheets and financials, so it's hard for them to navigate their companies. So it's a great foundation to whatever, if you're choosing anything in business in the future, right? Obviously, if you want to be like a programmer or like build something that way, it's not the right fit. But if you want to do something in business, including your own startup, then it's a great segue for everything, because the foundation you learn of the principles of finance is amazing.
Carry over to any area of life.
Carry on to anything, right? Because you're always raising money, that's finance, right? You're understanding your financials, your balance sheet, your income statement, cash flow statement, that's finance, right? So understanding, a lot of these concepts and in real life really helps you be one step ahead when you are a founder.
Right. And then, so let's go current day, Blue Scorpion Investments. What's your investment thesis when going into companies? What are the main things that you look for?
So our thesis is that we don't do pre-revenue. We want to see companies in the consumer space that are post-revenue. We typically say 2 to 12 million of revenue is our threshold, but we like to do companies that have done over 4 million of revenue just because it can be too early. But we've kept that optionality open just in case it's a very, very strong founder with a very strong business proposition that we feel that we need to get in earlier for. What we look for is really great founders. Like, people is the first thing we invest in because, businesses can change and pivot. We've had one founder that's pivoted 3 times now.
Wow.
And it's not even, it was a B2C company, now it's a B2B, but they're now finally hitting some really good traction. So the founder matters because of the ability to pivot, the ability to, be relentless in pursuing your goal, understanding them in terms of do they have the integrity as well to, work with integrity, because that for us is very important.
Right.
As both founders, James and I have that big philosophy of integrity. And also, are they convinced about the creations? Are they able to really, make it contagiously, known to people that this is what they want to do and why they want to do it. So founders first, then the product is very important because you're selling consumer product. Like, the product has to be A+ quality. And if it's close to A+ quality, then the founder has to agree that they are still working on making us better. That works for us. Because end of the day, a brand is great, but if it's like they say, you can only polish a turd so much, then it starts smelling. So the product integrity is not great. So we spend a lot of time doing product testing with ourselves. Obviously, if it's not a male product, then we give it to our female audiences or community to try. So we do a lot of product testing, and until we get like very positive feedback, we don't really look at it. So that's the second thing. The third thing is really, are we able to add value, right? Like, what's the value we can add? Is the market size big enough for this? And stuff like that, research-driven things like, understanding TAM is important because it's a very small market. Then, to make anything out of business, you got to own 20% of the market. Is that feasible?
Really
yeah.
Right.
So things like that, it's also important. So the holistic picture is when all things align on those 3 things is when we end up doing the investment.
Right. And then are you giving the same allocation of funds in every company that you invest in at the first round? Or
so we try to be very, in this fund, we our initial capital, we try to do 2 to 3 million initial capital. We try to keep that so we can build a portfolio of 12 to 15 companies initially, and have some kind of, we obviously, some we're able to negotiate, we try to get at least 10% equity stake, 10 to 20.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're targeting. That's why the earliest stage, so that we're able to negotiate equity
post-revenue, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned a lot about the founder and how that's super important when investing, even more than the product maybe. How do you have time, or how much time does it take to really understand who the founder is, what they do on their personal time, and kind of get a picture?
Yeah, so we built this really good rapport with them, right? So we actually, all our founders, we're friends with them, right? It's not just like people we just see in the board meeting and stuff like that. We spend a lot of time. We also have now started implementing bi-weekly calls with all our founders to get to know them. But in the evaluation phase, we spend a lot of time with the founders. It's not just like, let's have 1 call, 2 calls, let's do diligence invest.
Right.
We actually spend a lot of time, we have to meet them in person. Like, that's why during 2020, we did not make any investments because we can't, without meeting teams and people, we cannot.
You weren't going to do Zoom, you said.
Yeah, so we also, started a new thing, which we learned from one of the failures we had early on. The first fund was that we need to interview all the staff as well, like at least the main people, just to understand how management is managing them, because talking to someone, they can make this great picture, and some people are very good at
selling the story
and selling themselves, but how they're managing people, how they're viewed by their people who work for them and the lieutenants, and even the very junior staff is important. Right. So we try to get a sense of that as well by interviewing people. So, a lot of time is spent there.
Beautiful. And I think that a lot of people, and this carries beyond even just VC investments, cutting failures short and not dragging them on is very hard to do in any area of life. When do you decide that this investment, we made the investment, we no longer believe in the thesis of this company? When does that happen, or does that ever happen?
So we try to, so even if we believe that we don't want to put more money into a company, we will still try our best to take the company as further, just to give our investors and ourselves that we are doing the best we can, right? So obviously when something is just like, it's just not going to work, we're going to cut our losses and move on, but we always helping the founders, right, all the way through. So, it's a very important thing because, when a founder actually asked me this question, it's like, yeah, it's great, like investors are very helpful when things are going great, but what do you guys do first when things are not going well?
Right.
And I think that's very important because a lot of VCs just check out very fast. I think, you have to keep, even if it means like, okay, you don't want to take the risk of putting more money, but whatever you can take, maybe getting, other investors on board who are willing to take higher risk or something. So you have to try your best all the way through and, hold the hand of the founder. And I think a lot of funds don't do that. And I think that's very important.
We touched on this before the podcast a little bit with regard to spirituality and how you and Jameson both balance your life and, treating people kindly and so on. Was that something that you grew up with, inherent to you? Is it something that you kind of discovered later in life?
Yeah, so I think it's my upbringing. My parents always said that, right? Like integrity is very important and, being honest person is very important. So I think that philosophy carried. Jameson always had that philosophy. He was always, he will live by integrity, and if everything breaks down, he will never let integrity break down, right? So he's got that solid foundation of that. I think that was the basis of why we kind of partnered with each other, because we knew no matter what happened that the integrity which we both had is allowing us to have a trusted partnership, right? And I think that was a very important part of doing the fund, is that we both had that philosophy.
And today, is there some form of practice that you do on a continuous basis? Is it more of consciousness? Do you meditate?
I don't meditate, but I guess, surrounding myself with good people is just something that I've always enjoyed. And I think it also elevates you, just good human beings. And I think that's been very helpful for me. And, Jameson also obviously does a lot of stuff as well. And so I think it's just, for me, it's always surrounding myself with positive and good people. And I felt that always helps me. People who've excelled in different things, but also have this humility that
Right.
kind of really draws me. I was reading this book, it's called Good to Great, and it talked about this, like, there's level 4 and level 5 leaders. Those people who are very self-centered about themselves can never be level 5 readers. They end up only being level 4 readers. It's the humility guys who don't want to take the credit and really look at the good of everything else. They are the ones that become level 5 leaders, right? So it's very interesting. And those are the guys who actually end up making the difference.
Wow.
So, so I really was drawn to that. And, that's why like humility and integrity and stuff like that was really an important lesson for me. And I think when I was younger, I didn't have as much humility as I do now because, working on Wall Street, you learn the hard way. And
Right.
I think with experience and you realize that has longer legs, right? If you look at like some leaders like Warren Buffett, who has so much humility, like he doesn't care about himself. He
Right.
talks about, the businesses and how he's investing and the philosophy and all that.
Right.
So like, I think, so like you said, I don't meditate, but I do surround myself with others, and I read a lot of books around those kind of people that keeps me in that kind of
State of mind,
headspace. Yeah.
right.
So for me, that is sort of meditative.
Yeah. Everybody has their own.
Everyone has
yeah,
their own way of doing it, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point. They say one of the only choices you have in life are who you surround yourself with, and then everything else is an effect of that.
Correct.
So that makes total sense. You mentioned books. Are there specific books or podcasts that have really changed your life or investment thesis or anything?
Yeah. So I Steve Schwartzman from Blackstone is something I always looked up to. So he came up with a book called What It Takes. And I read that book, and it really resonated with the journey, he had with Blackstone, the journey we're going through, and talking about, everyone thinks that look at the success, but no one understands the journey is very difficult to get there. And, when we were raising money for the first fund, how difficult it was. And, Steve Schwartzman said it took him a year before anyone gave him the first check.
Wow.
Right? So people don't realize that. So that really resonated with me. And I actually reached out to him an email, just like a very authentic cold email saying that I read your book and it really inspired me and gave me the strength to keep continuing on with this journey. And this is back in Thanksgiving 2019. And within 2 days, I got a response from him, and then we kept in touch and exchanged a couple more emails. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's the lesson. Don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Don't be afraid. Right. The thing I've learned over the years is like, if you don't try, you fail. So you put stories, and this is from Kabbalah, which you also do, is we put stories in our head, right? Like about things, but like, unless we take action, we don't know, right? So like, if I wrote him an email and he didn't respond, at least I know I tried.
Right.
But if I didn't write it, I would have in my head like, what if I wrote? What if I then? Oh, he's not going to respond. What's the point? Like, I convinced myself.
Right.
So this is not the way to do it. So sometimes just taking the action, you won't know what the answer is unless you take the action.
And there's nothing really to fear at the end of it, right?
Nothing to fear. No one's putting a gun to your head.
Right.
The only fear is when fear of death, and this is not a fear of death, then you should do it.
Love that. This is obviously very relevant today, probably more than ever. Anxiety, fear, depression in the world. What do you think's the root cause of that? Why is it increasing? Is there just more social media now? So it seems like it is.
Yeah, I have a different view on it. Like, I think there's a lot of the social media and the press, and I think the way things are portrayed, like people think they're not perfect because they don't have this life or that life through social media, or all the negative stuff that press covers. So I think this creates it. And, people need to focus on like the little things in life that matter and give you happiness and joy. Like even just enjoying a sunrise, or enjoying like, going to the gym and having those dopamines come. Like, I think that's the little things that keep you going and keep you out of it. And that's what I've done. Like, look, there's, being a fund manager, especially an emerging fund manager, is not easy. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of things we've gone through, and ups and downs. And, when the downs happen, like, I just focus on the simple things in life, right? Like, I love eat good food, still be healthy. Don't eat to binge enough.
Right.
Like, you can still enjoy good food, like enjoy like walks, enjoy the weather, enjoy the gym, enjoy the company of your really close friends who care about you, and your family and people who you love that, unconditionally care for you that way. And building those relationships really help. And I think that's the key to staying out of that depression and anxiety and all that stuff.
Right. It's such a simple thing, but I think it's so overlooked in today's, right?
It's hard to practice. Yeah.
Yeah. You spend hours indoors in the dark looking at your phone. How do you expect to feel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It should be obvious, but
go out with your friends, like
right.
People you care, just like laugh about stupid stuff, get a meal together, right? Like, go exercise. I guess it's gonna make you feel great, right? Like,
completely.
Or watch a funny movie also, like, something like that.
So many resources.
So many things out there that you can do. But
yeah. What's your favorite food? You mentioned food's a big thing for you. So what type of food?
I love Japanese food.
Okay.
I really love Japanese food. I'm a big foodie. I actually post a lot of food on my Instagram. And
nice.
The one thing people always say that I should be a food blogger. I'm like, maybe,
why not?
The time is the thing,
right.
But I do it just because I'm passionate, not because of anything other reason. So maybe one day I'll start a food blog.
So for our listeners, what's the best Japanese restaurant in New York?
That's a tough one. So my favorite sushi used to be Sushi Yasuda with the main chef, Mitsuru. So I'm excited for him to open his new restaurant and go back there. That's always been my favorite. My old boss, when I just started a career, didn't have appreciation of sushi, spoiled me by taking me there. And this has been a journey for over a decade, right? Like, I think when Mr. Yasuda himself used to actually be the chef there, and he left to Japan now. I've been going there, so yeah,
That's a good. They do omakase style, right?
They do omakase,
Yeah.
but omakase is different than others. Which what I like about them is, so there are two things. They first of all have flash frozen fish, which means that the minute they get it from the Japanese market, they flash freeze it and send it, so it stays. The freshness stays. Number two is like when you do the omakase, it's not what the chef always wants to give you. The chef will work with you, say, what do you like? What pieces you like? And you're really getting a kind of hybrid omakase where, you pay for the pieces you eat, but you get the experience from the chef. He asks you, what do you like? Do you like salmon? Do you like the tuna thing? What kind? And in Yasuda, they get to know you. And over time, when you're eating certain things, you don't even have to say anything. You go and sit there, and the chef knows this is what I need to serve you. Wow. That's what I really appreciate about it. That's why it was my top sushi restaurant.
It sounds akin to the relationship between a VC investor and a founder, right? It's not your company, but you're very much influencing the product that's being
exactly. Built. You're in sync. So when a chef is in sync with the customer to that level, is like you can say a founder is in sync with the investor.
Right. The magic's created.
So I think maybe my sushi experience made me a good investor. Who knows?
Who knows? It's always hard to tell where it started. Excellent. So that aside, what other areas of your life do you invest time in that maybe aren't work related, and how do you keep that balance between obviously driving your business, but then also in just enjoying life?
Yeah. So my biggest hobbies are food and travel. So I spend a lot of time, my spare time for dinners, to go to restaurants. Like I'm out almost every day, I would say. Wow. With different friends. Even if work meetings, I'd rather say let's go for dinner because I would like to have a nice meal. And travels. Travel is something I really appreciate. Like I really enjoy finding new places, discovering new places, and being in different places. It's just something, as a child, I went to British school in India. So a very cosmopolitan society. 70% of my friends are not even Indian. Wow. So I was used to being in this cosmopolitan life, and London's cosmopolitan, New York's. So for me, the best way to experience cultures is travel and food. And so I like to do that. And the great thing with travel now, and like you're saying, balancing, is now that, post-pandemic, we can do remote working. So that allows me to also travel a little bit and also work remotely, although it's not the most efficient, I must say, but certain time zones not efficient. It's hard. But, that's something that I'm able to do more now than I used to pre-pandemic.
Right. And we asked this question to all of our guests. If you could look back at your younger self, maybe 18, 20 years old, what would you tell him that maybe would very much impact his decision-making, or even just any message you'd give to him?
Man, you were so naive.
Really? No, that's the first thing.
That's the worst thing. Like a lot of things, like impractical, and obviously I was very ambitious, very driven, but just didn't understand the complexity of life. And I think it's just, your parents always gave you advice and never really took it. Good advice. And I think that would be thinking like, I wish I had taken some of their advice because they were right about a lot of things.
Right. And then you have to go through a process.
You have to go through the process. But I think that's just life. I mean, that's maturity. And like, as you say, like, like maturity comes from your own experiences. Like people can tell you whatever, but unless it comes within, you're not going to change. And an example for me was like, my parents, my father especially, he always told me that I should study, get good grades and all. And, eventually I did, but like that journey was within myself. Like when he told me, I didn't care. I was just like having fun with my friends and always getting into trouble. I was a troublemaker when I was young. Very big trouble.
Really? Big time?
I was very popular in school. I was a school treasurer. I was always in the student council. But I've been suspended for stupid things. I've done, things. I didn't get good grades like early on my, schooling. Because I was never going to classes. I was just,
just messing
around, as they say. Until it came to me myself, like my parents always trying to ground me and do other things to, get me to study, but it never worked. I always figured a way out around it.
Yeah.
It came within that, okay, I really want to go to a good university in London to really build my own career. I didn't want to do the family business. And only that came after my 10th grade, right? So luckily it wasn't too late.
Wow, it was right on the cusp,
It was right in the cusp. And then I ended up topping school. Like, I got the second highest grades in the whole school after that, which all the teachers were shocked. But like I said, this is all naivety and not knowing, but you have to go through your own journey, unfortunately.
Right.
To realize, what is it, what you want and what you need to do.
Right. Absolutely. Gautam, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
We'll have you on again soon.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you
so
very much.